Hey friends, welcome back to the No Wrong Turns podcast with me, Audrey the Hickman Hunter. I'm Audrey and I'm your host. I am so happy that you're here. If you like what you're listening to today, make sure that you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Every other Tuesday, we have an awesome guest come on and chat about their story and their passions, and how their passions have grown and evolved throughout their story. Subscribe to the No Wrong Turns pod with Audrey the Hickman Hunter on your podcast player or app, so you guys will never miss an episode. Hey friends, happy Tuesday, and happy anniversary to the No Wrong Turns pod. Thank you, listeners, for hanging out with us in your earbuds, your headphones, your car trips, your workouts, your walks around the neighborhood, wherever you're listening to us. Thank you so much for your investment and support with the podcast. I am so excited to enter year 2 of podcasting with you all. To celebrate, we'll be having a giveaway soon in collaboration with one of my friends. Make sure that you check our social media on Instagram or Facebook to be able to enter to win. Thank you again so much for listening and supporting the No Wrong Turns pod. I seriously cannot wait for year 2 of podcasting and look forward to growing the podcast and growing our No Wrong Turns community. If you're listening to this pod around the day that it comes out, then we are about to enter Thanksgiving week. Crazy how we got here so quickly. For me, I feel like I just blinked and it was Halloween yesterday, and today we're about to have Thanksgiving. As of today, my husband and I have no idea what we're doing for the actual day of Thanksgiving. This year, holiday plans are just going to be tricky and tough to navigate the balance of how to keep those we love healthy and at the same time wanting just to cancel the threat of COVID so we can just be with and keep the traditions with those who we love on the holidays coming up. Check out the December book club selection called Me and White Supremacy, Combat Racism, Change the World, and Become a Good Ancestor by Layla Saad. Our next book club meeting is Tuesday, December 15th at 7:30 p.m. Chicago time. You can find me on the social medias and I can give you more info on the book club. And you can see the show notes for the book link. Listeners, welcome to the 27th episode. Today on the podcast, we have Sarah Micula. I met Sarah from our church growing up. Throughout today's podcast, you'll hear Sarah reference many of our past podcast guests. Sarah worked with Chris Shea from episode 2 at the World Missions Bureau, and she's friends with Eric Himes, who actually recommended Columbia College for her to go to. Eric was in episode 23, and she was roommates with Lindsay Bailey from episode 17. Sarah is a retired podcaster, and during this COVID season, she guesstimates 70 to 100 masks. But more importantly, she is passionate about the local church and women's ministries. Sarah grew up in Michigan, first in Detroit, and then her family moved out to a rural suburb of Detroit. Growing up, her family always had 2 dogs and a cat. She enjoyed trying all of the sports, including softball, figure skating, soccer, and volleyball. The sport that she thinks that she was the best at was snowboarding. Where she grew up in Michigan, there was a small ski hill where she learned how to snowboard and where she worked slinging nachos. Sarah says that she loves learning, but not academics. This made for a tricky situation when deciding what she wanted to do for college. She ended up moving to Chicago, where she majored in fashion business management at Columbia College. At the end of college, Sarah made the life-changing decision to focus and get serious about her commitment and relationship with Jesus, and this changed everything for her. Sarah worked at the Salvation Army, beginning in the World Missions Department, then at the thrift stores, and lastly in the women's department. Sarah shares with us how all of these parts of her story prepared her and her husband Simon for what would come next in their story, becoming pastors. You are for sure going to want to lean in and not miss hearing Sarah's story as she highlights her passions of serving in the local church and her love for women's ministry and being obedient to what the Lord is calling her to. No matter if this is your story and you can relate to her or not, I believe that there is something in this episode for you. All right, here's my conversation with Sarah. Welcome to the No Wrong Turns podcast. Today on the podcast, we have Sarah Micula.
That's
Did I
right.
get it?
You got it.
Awesome. Thanks for being on the podcast, Sarah.
Thank you, Audrey. I just want to take a moment and just say how impressed I am with you, with your podcast.
Thank you. From one podcaster to another, it really means a lot.
You know what? When you sent me that initial email, I was like, wow, that's how it's done. That's how the initial communication is done. I wish I could redo a few because it was just so polished, very thoughtful, very clear. So bravo to you.
Oh, thank you very much. I thank you. I'll receive that.
Yes.
So Sarah, can you tell us, they know already that you are a fellow podcaster, but can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, about who you are, where you're from, maybe just, the highlights so we can get to know you?
Yeah. Well, I would say that I'm a retired podcaster. I'm retired because it was a part of my former job, and I quit that job last August, when my husband Simon and I enrolled in the Salvation Army's College for Officers Training. So that's what's new with me. My husband and I are what is called first year cadets at the college. And before all this, we lived in Lombard. We've been married. We just celebrated 7 years together. We got married when we were 30. You can do the math. And we went to the Salvation Army Oak Brook Terrace Corps. That was a very important, big part of our life, that church. And I worked for the Salvation Army for 12 years, first starting off in the World Missions Department. Then I worked for a little bit in the adult rehabilitation realm. I worked in the Chicago North Side location where I met my husband. And then I went back to territorial headquarters where I'd previously worked to work in women's ministries, which I really, really loved. And I really that's the job I feel like I poured most of my heart into. And that is where I did the podcast. And yeah, so that's a bit of the work life, church life. I've lived in Chicago since 2002. I moved here from Michigan, from southeastern Michigan, when I was 19. And it's not that I didn't necessarily want to go home, I just got here and it just stuck.
It's a great place, great town, Chicago.
It's a great town. I love it.
Awesome. So you said you grew up in Michigan. So can you tell us a little bit about what life was like for you growing up? Maybe some highlights?
Yeah. Okay, wait. Quick thing. You could include this.
Okay.
Has Chris Shea been on this podcast?
Yes, I believe she was episode 2. So shout out to Chris Shea, episode 2.
Hey, Chris. So Chris was my boss for 5 years. And Chris and I would talk about our childhood a lot. She grew up in Rockford, and I spent time the first 7 years of my life growing up in Detroit. And then we moved out to the far, far, rural suburbs of Detroit. But it was funny when she could be my mother. Her childhood life in Rockford mirrored my childhood life in Detroit. So interesting.
How so?
The way we played outside. I think both our dads were kind of machine workers. Just a lot of that, the nuclear family piece, and the kind of vibe and culture of the block I lived on and the block she lived on. So that might not say a whole lot about Detroit. Detroit's working very hard to catch back up to the world. But so that's where my life started, in Detroit. I started elementary school in Detroit, and then we moved out to a town called Howell, which is much more rural. And in that time, we went to the Salvation Army as our church. It's where my dad grew up, going to a Salvation Army church as a child. He was one of those kids. He lived in the projects. He lived in a project in Detroit that received Salvation Army, like a bus ministry. So a bus would roll in and a bunch of kids would pile in and they'd go to the local Salvation Army. And from
Wow.
there, yeah, so from there, my grandma started attending and she really, really loved the Salvation Army. She really found her home and her place in what is women's ministries now. Back then was called Home League. And it's just really a part of my heritage, the Home League Women's Ministries, part of the Salvation Army. And yeah, so that's a little bit about the young life. It was my mom, my dad, and my sister and I, the four of us, lived together from childhood up until my sister and I took off when we were old enough to leave the house.
Nice. This is just random, but did you have any pets or anything like that growing up?
Oh yeah, we are big pet people. We always had 2 dogs and a cat. And
Wow.
my dog, the first dog, died when I was 18, and we got her when I was 2. So this
Wow, that would
dog,
be a hard loss.
yeah, she was like my little sister. Yeah. So yeah, we've always been dog people. My parents have always had 2 dogs. My mom has 2 dogs right now.
Does she have a cat as well?
She does not. The cat thing was actually my thing. So when that cat finally died, she took a while to go as well. They did not fill her spot. So yeah, we love pets.
Awesome. Just curious.
Hmm.
So when you were in high school, what were some of the kind of interests or hobbies that filled your time?
I am very sporty, but I'm not very athletic. And I guess what I mean by that is I love to play.
Hmm.
So I might have not been that great at the sport, but I really wanted to try. I really wanted to be a part of the team. So even from like middle school, I'd try out for basketball. I wouldn't make the team, but so wanted it. I like wanted it so much. I never made the team, but kept trying. I played some softball in late elementary and middle school. I figure skated for a
Ooh, wow.
time. Yeah, for 5 years. But again, I wasn't very good. I got so dizzy when were learning the spins. I couldn't
I
maintain
would
it.
imagine so.
Yeah, it was not good for me. I was sad because I love figure skating. And then I did soccer. I tried volleyball, and actually the one sport that really I was fairly good at,
Hmm.
but it took some time to learn. But I feel like I have the most skill in is snowboarding because
Oh.
where I grew up in Howell, the town next door, Brighton,
Hmm.
had what is called Mount Brighton, and it's like a local ski hill.
Uh-huh.
It was probably like an old garbage dump that no, like literally that they transformed into a summertime golf course and then in the winter ski resort, quote unquote. So that's
Oh,
where I got
wow.
to learn, and that was actually my first job, was working at Mount Brighton, slinging nachos.
Oh,
So
nice. I love me some nachos with that hot
yeah,
cheese.
yeah. So I was always trying to stay active. I just loved to play. I loved the camaraderie of sports and teams. So I did filled that with my time. I was in choir in high school. Also not very good at singing, but I loved the community of
Hmm.
choir. And it was a really big deal in that high school. And there was like a legacy. My sister's very skilled singer. She would at our Salvation Army camp, Central Music Institute, CMI, she would win a lot
Hmm.
of top
Ooh.
vocal awards, and I did not. But I love the community part of a choir, so I was big into that in high school, and I did stay active in our core, but I was also kind of like a party girl in high school and college, so it was an interesting line I walked. It was not always good, but there was a lot of things I did love about high school and those
Awesome.
teen years. like coming out to camp. I loved coming out to camp in Wisconsin in the summers in high school, where I met a lot of my very best friends that I'm still friends with today.
Same.
Yeah.
So when you were kind of maybe junior, senior year, what were you kind of thinking about your next steps? Did you know if you wanted to go to college, or were you thinking about starting to work? Did you just want to get out of the town, or did you want to stay there? What were your thoughts?
I think I've changed a ton since high school in terms of my planning, because right now I'm much more of a planner, and I have been for the last 10 years. But those last 2 years of high school, I feel like I never thought about the very next day. And I didn't have super high grades, hovered around a 3.0, sometimes would drop below that, sometimes go above. So it was at that weird grade point average. I knew that the some of the universities in Michigan, it just wasn't quite high enough
Hmm.
to secure a spot. So I kind of knew that. I was like, I guess I'm probably gonna have to go to community college to start things off, because
Mm.
I just don't have high enough grades, and I love learning, but I don't love academics. I don't like homework.
Mm.
I'm not I'm easily distracted in a lecture, but at the same time I love learning. So I really needed to find a school that made sense in. And
Hmm.
so, yeah, for junior, senior, I just didn't give it a lot of thought. I knew the thing I always loved from as a child is I really loved fashion. I loved dressing Barbie dolls. I loved paper dolls. I loved any apparel that I put on, or I put on dolls. And so
Hmm.
that was always something that was the first, if someone asked what I wanted to do or liked, I'd be like, I want to be like a fashion designer. But I
Hmm.
didn't really apply myself. The most I applied myself was taking a sewing class in senior year, which I really enjoyed, and that has given me lifelong skills where I can sew, and I've sewn 70 to 100 masks in this last 2 months.
Wow, that's
So
impressive.
it is skills that have I've carried with me, so that's been good. But
Yeah.
no, I didn't plan too well in that time, and so when I graduated, I still didn't know what I was doing. And I always worked, so I always had part-time jobs. And at that point, I was like, well, I'm just gonna keep working, and it's called Schoolcraft. That's like a fairly local community college. I was like, I guess I'll go to Schoolcraft because I'd rather go closer to Detroit than Lansing or Flint. So I went towards Detroit,
Hmm.
but I hated it. I hated community college, and I dropped out.
Did you have to move to go to community college, or were you able to stay at home?
I was able to stay at home, and I started working at Joann Fabrics in the fabric department, and really started trying to be having more conversations with my parents about what's going to happen, what's going on
Hmm.
here, Sarah. What do you want to do? How can we keep you moving forward? And so I did. I
Hmm.
applied to Michigan State for textile design. It was merchandising and textile design,
Okay.
and I got rejected from Michigan State because my grades just weren't high enough, and they said
Hmm.
put some more time in at the community college and try again. And and then oh, you know who I just remembered? My friend Eric Himes back then said, "Hey, have you ever heard of this school called Columbia College? It's in Chicago, and it's like an art school. They have a fashion program. You should check it out." So I was like, okay. So my mom and I started looking into it. My mom and dad and I came down, or maybe it's just my mom and I came for a visit weekend in, say, like it was like March 2002,
Hmm.
and I just loved it. I was terrified of my mom driving in the city. It scared me so much. I was melting down. It just really freaked me out. Because Detroit downtown is not like Chicago downtown. But once we got on foot, walking around the
On
blocks of
foot.
Chicago, I loved it. I loved the buildings that Columbia had classes in. They were just these old, beautiful brick high rises, and the programs just it just seemed like me. I felt very at home. And to top it off, they had open admissions. They
Oh,
didn't, yeah, which was like perfect for me. Not that I like had F's or D's. I just didn't have. Here's what I think about Columbia. They don't place that much value on
grades.
the letters. Their learning there is just a different experience. And if you ever have Zane Kohler on the show, he's also a graduate. That his
Mm,
We share that alma mater. It's just a different kind of learning environment, and it just fit me, and I really, really loved it. So that's
awesome.
what I ended up doing at age 19. Packed up and moved into the dorms on Congress.
So when you were moving there, what was the major that you were going for? Fashion and textile as well?
Initially started off as fashion design, and then I realized that I'd rather sell it than make it.
Mm,
The making part, which is, I think, a beautiful artistic process, I don't know that I have the full patience for, because there's pattern making, and I don't know that I had enough of the passion for the construction and design part. But I was
like,
like, I really love the idea of like one day owning my own store
hmm
and selling these items. So I switched from fashion design to the fashion business. It's not a major. The major, it's like a really long title, and they probably have changed it since, but it's like you get your bachelor's in arts, entertainment, and media management. And so underneath that, it might be like sports management, music management, fashion management, and
hmm
merchandising. And so that's where I switched to. So I entered in with the fashion business program.
Awesome. So then do they have like dorms and that kind of stuff that you lived in, or did you have to find an apartment? How did that look for you?
Columbia historically was a commuter college, so when I started there, there was only two dorm options, and it was kind of hard to get a spot. And if you didn't get a spot, you just have to find an apartment, whether it's in the South Loop, where Columbia is, or out in one of the various neighborhoods of Chicago. But that first year, we felt strongly I should get a dorm since would be new to the city.
Hmm
The dorm I moved in was the top four floors of the International Hostel building on Congress Parkway. It was directly across the street from Roosevelt University. So it was like my building, L tracks, Roosevelt University on Wabash. And so our meal plan was actually at Roosevelt, because since Columbia didn't really do dorms all that well,
hmm
they partnered with Roosevelt so that we could have meal plans there. So every day we'd cross the street and go into the Roosevelt building and eat with the Roosevelt students. So yeah, started at the dorm first year. Second year got an apartment, still in the South Loop,
hmm
right in the area where a lot of students would live if they lived in the South Loop, in Printers Row, which I loved. I think it's a really cool neighborhood. We used to have this coffee shop called Gourmands, and it was
Mm.
just when you watched Friends growing up, you're like, oh my gosh, it'd be so cool to like meet with my friends at like a coffee shop. And this was like exactly that, and it was so fun. I loved it.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so I really loved like my Chicago college experience. It was just a ton of fun.
Awesome. Was that then 4 years for you then? Or is the degree a different length?
No, you can finish in 4. I finished in 5. Mine took a little longer because I actually studied abroad
Oh,
my
very fun.
my junior year, and that kind of slowed down. I just wasn't able to get all the credits I needed that semester. So I had to make up for it. I think only one extra semester that I had to do online. So I believe I graduated, like if you would say I started right at 2002. I graduated in 2006. So really, I
Okay.
say 5 years because it was 5 years, I guess, after high school, I suppose. But
Gotcha. Where did you study abroad?
in London,
Ooh, that must have been really fun.
yeah, originally I was going to Spain. My girlfriend Caitlin and I decided we were going to go, and the program that we signed up for, the admission or the registration for the the program that we are going through, the numbers were so low they canceled it, and they said,
Oh, wow.
why don't you try a different company, or
Mm-hmm.
however it was. And so when we had to basically start the process over, have this heart to heart with my parents, and I was like, I don't know, I'm picking Spain because that's what Caitlin wants, but I don't know if that's really a good fit for me, because her like major or minor was Spanish. I was like, mine's not. And so maybe I should do something where I know the language, and makes more sense for me. So just made the choice to take my own path with that. And I'm really glad I did. I just seriously 3 days ago had a Zoom meetup with the girls that I studied abroad with.
Oh, that's so fun.
And it's been 15 years. So,
Wow.
yeah. So doing that kind of slowed down my graduation time, but it was a great experience, and got to do a little bit of traveling from there. Got to go to Paris and Amsterdam and Scotland and a few other parts of England. So it was just that's one of those things I recommend to a college student. And they're like, what's one thing you would have, piece of advice you give? I'm like, study abroad.
Yeah, my mom always told me that was her biggest regret, that she didn't study abroad in college.
Mm-hmm.
And so she told me that my whole life growing up, and my aunt did.
Mm-hmm.
And she went to Spain. So when I went to college, I studied
Mm-hmm.
abroad 3
Yeah.
times.
Yeah, I was like, you for sure have, right? I've
Yeah.
like lost track of the ones you've done.
Yeah. So I just remember always growing up, she would always tell me that. So yeah, I definitely couldn't recommend that enough.
Mm-hmm. It's really formational and unforgettable.
Very true.
Mm-hmm.
So when you were finishing up your degree, did you have like internships that you were doing to kind of lead you to your next possible job? Or what was that looking like for you?
Well, and right before I went to study abroad, I had a come to Jesus moment where Jesus really was calling me to him, after I was kind of, like I said, I was in high school. I was kind of a party girl, and I was kind of a party girl in college, and that really is in conflict, certainly with the church I grew up in, and certainly can be in conflict with the faith I professed, because it was really would affect the behavior I displayed a lot of times. That was not a reflection of the Christian woman I was or wanted to be. And
Mm-hmm.
so as I was going through that time when I was like 22, of really like kind of an identity crisis, the Lord met me on the floor and just said, you keep putting all these things in between us. Who do you want to be? Who do
Mm-hmm.
you want to be? Because I hear you saying you want to be this, but then I see you do this. So who do you want to be, Sarah? And do you want to receive my love? And do you want to live this
Wow.
life I'm calling you to? And I'm like, okay. uh, so that was right before study abroad. And so study abroad was it was a challenge because of the setting, and felt that conviction from the Holy Spirit, and
Mm-hmm.
trying to navigate that. So when I came home, I really was like, you know what? I'm going to be serious. I'm going to be really serious about this. And I moved in with Chris and Mick Shea, because I came back and had one semester of college left. Actually, no, 1 year. Sorry, 1 year of college left.
Mm-hmm.
And came back with no money. And so they let me live with them. I commuted down to Columbia. I started working at the Urban Outfitters. I was just opening at Oak Brook. I had worked for Urban Outfitters for 3 years before that. That was my spot. That was my college job, Urban. So
Fun.
yeah, so living with them really helped recenter me on who I decided I wanted to be, and who I
Mm-hmm.
felt God was calling me to be. So I was able to get involved at the church, and just reevaluate and recenter things. And so in that that last spring quarter or semester, I was in this really awesome class. I loved it. I loved it. I loved it. And it's a class that was really hard to get into. So it was made up of 3 different majors. Either you were in fashion design, fashion business, or photography. And the whole class was styling photo shoots.
Ooh, that's
It,
fun.
it was so fun. And that's what I really wanted to be. I wanted to be a magazine fashion editor. After like learning all the different things, like, oh, I could open a store, that would be cool. But I just loved, I always loved magazines growing up. I was just always really drawn to the artistry of them. And so in this class, I just like poured myself into it. I loved it. I really enjoyed it. And at the end of the semester, the teacher, he calls me or takes me aside in class. And he's like, Sarah, you worked really hard to get in this class. You fought to get in this class, and you've really proven yourself, and you work really hard, and you have an eye for this. And every quarter or every semester, we recommend someone to have an internship at Chicago Magazine in their editorial department. And we want to
Ooh.
recommend you for this summer
Wow.
internship. Yeah, life-changing stuff. And I was floored and overcome because I had already committed my summer to doing a summer mission team.
Oh no.
And the summer mission team was a central team, which is not historically viewed as a very glamorous experience.
Yep, I
the
was
the
on one of
other
those.
right. So the other teams that summer were going to India, or going to, I think, the Ukraine and to Kenya, I believe. And so I'm telling this instructor, my professor, I'm sorry, I can't, because I'm going to be driving in a minivan from Indiana to Minnesota to Illinois for the summer. And to Tennessee. Wait, we'll go to Bahamas too, so that's cool. That's cool. But
Yeah.
he was like, "Wait, what?" And I'm like, I've made this commitment. And is there any chance there's like a fall internship available? Because that would work perfect. And he's like, no, there's not. Like, you
Oh
either do it or you
no.
don't. And I was in a dilemma, but I really felt strongly that I should follow through on my commitment, and that the Lord would what I don't know, like he would just, I knew he would take care of all these things, and if I just trusted him.
Mhm.
And he has been faithful to that. But it's, there's points where you wonder, like, wow, what would have life been like if I would have taken that internship? And
Yeah.
knowing what my college and a bit of my high school life was like, I don't know that it would have been who I don't know if it would have taken me to who I wanted to be.
Mm.
And I think I made the right choice, even though it wasn't the glamorous choice. It wasn't the obvious worldly choice of what literally makes sense in
Mhm.
terms of, you're going to graduate, Sarah. Don't you want to have a job lined up? And I was like, I'll figure it out. The Lord will make a way. And he did. And because after I did that mission trip, I just really formed a really strong relationship with Chris Shea, with the World Missions Department. So when a job
Mhm.
opened up in their department, I was able to apply, and I had all this experience with them, that it
Mhm.
was a natural progression to a job that has literally taken me all over the world, to Russia, to Chile, to Kenya, to the Philippines. You know, I don't know that could have happened as a magazine editor. Sure, there's locations. There's locations where you do photo shoots. Yes, but would I have been in God's will doing those jobs? I can't say that I was or would have been.
Wow.
So I did not really have an internship. I had the opportunity, but I did not take it.
So you went on SMT for the summer, a central team, summer missions team,
Mhm.
and you kind of gave us the scope of the places that you went on or
Mhm.
went to. you kind of just highlighted how that trajectory for a little bit more in the future, but what came next for you after you completed that summer?
After that summer, I moved. So I was it was like the year before it was London, then the Shays, then summer mission team, and then I moved into apartment in Logan Square. This is back in 2006. Okay, I'm just giving everyone a timeline.
Yeah.
2006.
OG Logan Square.
OG Logan Square. Okay, you said it, not me. Okay. Back in the day, I lived in the building where what now houses what's it called? Bang Bang Pie.
Wow.
Have you been there?
Prestigious. No, but
I
I know the name.
That's my flex. That's my flex for today. I lived in that building before the pie
Before the
shop moved
pies.
in. Before the pies. When all you had to worry about was there was a lot of worries in that neighborhood back then. But anyways, so I moved after summer mission team, moved to Logan Square. I kept my job at Urban Outfitters, and I just rode my bike every day to work, and came home and did online homework at the library, the local library, because could not afford internet at the apartment. And so that's where I was in 3 places that year: at the public library, at work at Urban Outfitters, or I was at the core, because I was still at that point I was really living out my faith in a lot of ways. So that was for during fall, winter, and then that job opened up in World Missions, and I applied, and I got the job. And so after that, I moved to Oak Park with the incomparable Lindsay Bailey. That is when Lindsay and I became roomies in 2007.
Ooh, very fun.
Added to the timeline.
By the time this podcast comes out, she will have already been a guest on the podcast. I just don't know which episode number yet.
Ooh, okay, cool. Oh, look at us go. Look at us.
Awesome.
Good.
So you were living in Oak Park, and you were commuting to your job, because that was in another suburb, correct?
Des Plaines, yep. THQ territorial headquarters at that time was in Des Plaines. So we lived down the street from our friends Kathleen and Eric Himes, and we made a friend. I went to elementary school with. I reconnected with, because I found out she actually lived in the Austin neighborhood just next to Oak Park. And so I told her, hey, she wanted a job in ministry. And I said, hey, there's this job opening in the youth department at THQ. She applied, she got the job. So her name is Kristen.
Fun.
Yeah. So me, Kristen, Eric would carpool from Oak Park to Des Plaines. And we had so much fun. We had a blast for about a good year of carpooling.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Very fun. So you started your new job. How did that go for you? What were some highlights and takeaways that you had from that time? I know you kind of already said some, but just want to leave space.
Yeah, during that time it was a lot of fun working at THQ, because there's a lot of young adults getting their careers started in different roles at THQ. And so we just had a lot of fun together on lunches and breaks, and we would really like come alongside each other and help each other with different projects, or how to write a certain email, or Eric would ask me to be on staff at CBL Line, the young adult track, and I just loved that. That was a lot of fun, and help with regeneration, the conference. So I loved pieces of that. And I loved fundraising in the job I had for World Missions. I handled the child sponsorship and additional kind of above and beyond fundraising. So I got to just be really creative in that job. And Chris really mentored me, and she really trusted me and brought out a lot of good things in me, and helped me in the very beginning when I was just learning how to work in an office and didn't know certain not etiquette's not the right word, but just professionalism, I guess. She helped, round out some edges for me, where, my old job at Urban Outfitters, you could just like wear whatever you wanted, the weirder you dress, the better, So she never tried to change the way I dressed, but that's kind of the environment I was coming from.
Yeah.
Was this real like loose and wild space to like, oh, this is an office and this is how it works and this is how you start an email, address a certain person, or this is how you don't do things. So it was a good time of learning, and I received those things. I don't remember getting defensive about that training I received, but just was like, okay, got it. Okay, I just want to learn. I just want to do good. I just want to do the best I can. And it was a really good time to really be around a lot of Christians, and I loved that because I hadn't had that. I really in a very concentrated space ever, besides just living with my parents.
Mm-hmm.
So to live with Lindsay, who's a Christian, then go to work with all these Christians and go to church. It was becoming a bit of a bubble, but it was it was something I needed at the time to really disciple me and just keep centering me on what was important in my life.
This week in our sponsor spot is me, Audrey, and the No Wrong Turns pod. Right now, we are gearing up for year 2 of the podcast. Usually we pre-record / batch record episodes so that we can be consistent in getting an episode to you every other Tuesday. At this moment, we are in the process of reaching out to possible new guests and need your help. Who do you want to have on the podcast? Or do you have a story and passion that you want to share with us? If this invitation is grabbing you and you want to hear more about what it would be like to be a guest on the pod, reach out to us on our social medias at No Wrong Turns Pod or email us at nowrongturnspod@gmail.com. Reaching out to us just means you want to hear more. No obligation to share your story if it ends up not being your thing. Thank you so much for sharing this first year of podcasting with me and the No Wrong Turns pod. All right, back to Sarah's story.
So it was a lot of fun those first 5 years, but then I just felt God said at one point at that 5th year mark, you've done all you could do here. It's time to move on.
Wow.
Yep. And so then through some various conversations and really wanting to put my degree in fashion to work, someone's like, you should reach out to Major John Aaron and see, because he runs thrift stores in Chicago, and you love thrift stores and you love vintage and antiques, and that just seems like a really good fit for you. So I did. I reached out to him and transferred from territorial headquarters to the Adult Rehabilitation Center, overseeing some stores and working with managers. And really, at that time, they were getting ready to tear down kind of like their flagship store to rebuild it.
Okay.
In the Lincoln Park neighborhood, which is the really top-notch donations. It's just like a great store. I've gotten really nice things there.
Same.
Yeah. So good. So I got to be a part of the leadership team that rebuilt and then reopened that store. And that was just great learning there, and learning about this ministry the Salvation Army does that really so many Salvationists just don't have really a clue about. It's really like a 2-part thing, the ministry of people working out their recovery, and then the employees that run the stores. And we have such opportunity there to reach people and to love people. And it can be hard in that environment because you're really requiring a lot from people. It's a business. You're selling things.
Yeah.
And you're selling them not to make anyone rich, just to fund a very important program that changes lives, and to send money back to the headquarters so that other programs can get maintained. It's just all about serving people. And so it's like the more money we can make, the more people we can reach and serve and support. And, customers don't like it when you raise prices because they're like, you got all this stuff for free.
Yeah.
Where you're like, yeah, we did get it for free. We have to honor the donors by not giving away these Ray-Ban sunglasses for $2. Ray-Ban sunglasses with the receipt for $160. We should ask, at least $20 for, but so just like, it was just it's an interesting part of the Army where, You're learning how to honor the donors, meet the need of the customer, support the employees, and help men and women in recovery. It's just such a diverse space of ministry. And that is where I met my husband, Simon.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So you started working there, and how long were you in that space, or like working that job?
I only worked there for a year and a half.
Wow. And so you just happened to meet Simon during that time.
Yeah, I that's what I came for, I guess. No, it just was the way the Lord unfolded things, you know. I met him pretty quickly after getting the job. He was one of the truck drivers, the most, like, trusted truck driver. He's such a hard worker, so efficient, very honest. So when you're, in that job, you're really trying to build a team of people you could trust, and everything's moving very quickly in that industry. I don't think a lot of people realize that. And so when I'm talking to the dispatch guy, I say, what driver can I trust that will get to all the locations, all the donation pickups, get to the store with a full truck before the end of the day? And he said, Simon. Every day of the week, it's always going to be Simon. And so that just was like, okay, who's Simon? Who's this guy? And then that's really how we met, was this really trustworthy Christian, godly man pouring his heart into his work. He just gives 100%. And so that certainly caught my attention. And he's tall and handsome. So I was like, who's this
he's
guy?
very tall.
6'7". So we're not joking when we say tall and handsome. You stop.
Yeah. So you guys met, started dating. And then you got married. Pretty.
Yep.
Kind of quick, right?
Yeah. We met, and I think we were both at that point in life. We were 29 when we met, and really hoping the next person we met would be the person we started our lives with. And so we were kind of both over the dating experience, and just was like, we're really both praying independently. Lord, well, I was a little snarky with God because in the community and culture of our church, the Salvation Army, I was just like, Lord, you got to bring someone in my life, because I'm never going to meet the person for me in the Salvation Army. I can see that. And I really felt he was like, oh, really? Is that what you think? Okay, challenge accepted, like. and sure enough, I met my man in the Army, just certainly not in the way I expected. And it's just been beautiful surprises and blessings ever since. So once we met, I think it didn't take very long for us to know and decide and be like, you're the person I want to be with. And we're not 24. Not that there's anything wrong at all with getting married at 24, but we are old enough to have gone through a number of relationships to say, like, okay, we know what we want. So I guess at this point, why wait? Let's start our life together. And so we made those vows and that covenant 7 years ago, and here we are.
Awesome. So after you guys got married, did you get married while you still had that same job, or had you moved on to something else by that time?
Oh, yeah. So by the time we got married, it was just about a year since I'd started at the ERC. So we got married in April, and when that summer hit, I really felt like, actually, you're not going to stay here all that much longer. and and so in that, I was like, Lord, what is next? Like, and so I started actually kind of evaluating what my 20s had been like in the church specifically. And it was challenging, because a lot of my friends were married, and they hadn't quite started having kids yet. They just started. Kathleen and Eric just had Wendy. But a lot of my other, what I was realizing was how church really compartmentalizes people based on where they are in life, or not even where they are in life, but what's their status? Are they married? Are they divorced? Do they have kids?
Mm-hmm.
Are they in college? And I felt in my 20s that, and especially in my late 20s, I was like, this church, not just this church, but any church, a church body does not know what to do with someone like me right now.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not in college, so let's just stop people in their late 20s with people in college if that's not what they want. She's not in college. She's not married. She doesn't have kids. Okay, she's a single adult. What do we do with single adults? And that's never been really well done, I don't think, because I don't think that's what society wants, really. And then therefore and it's not what the church wants. The church, often wants you to, you know, graduate high school, maybe college, get married, start having kids, and repeat.
Mm-hmm.
Grow kids to do the same. And I felt I was like, where do I fit into all these different categories? Because I just don't feel like I fit into any one. But and it came down to well, I am a woman. Okay, so what's a woman do in this? Like, oh, there's women's ministries. So I was starting to just by kind of breaking down the reality, I guess, of who I am and who I was. I was like, well, that's what I am. I'm a Christian woman, so I guess maybe women's ministries could be a space for me. And so I just started really thinking about and praying about pursuing women's ministries. And over that summer, I was thinking at a larger scale, like thinking about it at the local level of church, because
Mm-hmm.
all my best friends were in this really wonderful and beautiful young married couples group. But it was really hard for me because I wasn't. And I just they all would hang out and have a really beautiful time together, and it built their friendships, and I was missing out on that, and it really, really hurt. And I never want to then or now make them feel bad for that, but it's just it was what it was.
Yeah.
I didn't have a spouse, and I didn't get to be a part of that, and I had to try to make my own way. And what do we do with those people? Because a lot of people that get pushed in that situation just leave church.
Mm-hmm.
So if you choose to kind of fight through that, where do you go? And in those spaces, in those small groups. And so then I started thinking about it, not just at the local level, but at a larger level. Like for our church, the Salvation Army Women's Ministries is like an international institute. Like it's a really big and important part of the Salvation Army. If the Salvation Army is going to get started, a new corps, or just going to break ground in a new country, women's ministries is one of the first things that gets established. It's just historically a very important pillar of our local church and larger institution of the Salvation Army. So I was like, what influence does our territory, international have on the local level of this group, this women's ministries? And I was like, it's not looking that great. It's not bridging the gap, because for the most part we're thinking of it as the ministry for our grandmas, and we're not
Mm-hmm.
thinking of it as, what does this mean for us just as a woman, a Christian woman? Do I want to be a part of these spaces with other women? Because if it looks like this right now, I don't think I do, but it's a very valuable experience. And so I just started thinking about it and praying about it, and I ended up writing a job proposal
Oh, wow.
and a job description, and I had sent it. And the year before, when I was still in world, I had gone on with then Colonel Dawn Heatwall, who was the territorial secretary for women's ministry. So I spent 12 days with her. And so fast forward a year, and I have this thought placed on my heart by the Lord. And so I reached out to her with it. I'm like, hey, this is what I've been thinking and praying about this, and I think you guys should hire someone or make a position for someone to focus on kind of rebranding and breathing new life into women's ministries and really focusing on young women. And really the gap is from high school to 60, because young adult women are doing their own thing, more 20s, women in their 20s, and women in their 30s and 40s are oftentimes mothers, and their focus is their children and what their children's activities are, and not necessarily pouring into themselves. So all that to say, I wrote this proposal and this job description, and they were into it, and they were like, okay, we're going to move on this, and you're welcome to apply. So
Nice.
so I applied, and and so interviewed and got the job, and that happened in like really a fairly, because by the time I wrote the proposal, it was before their budget year, which was a good time to do it. And then they just reworked their budget and got it approved to add a new position to their department for October 1st. So I started October 1st.
Wow, that's
and did
awesome.
that for almost 6 years.
Wow. Can you share some of the highlights from that position?
Yeah, some highlights. The initial, if I break it into kind of the 2 years, every 2 years, the first 2 years I felt was a lot of research and a lot of information gathering and seeing what other denominations were doing, other nonprofits even were doing. What was the pulse of women's ministry or women in ministry in the United States? What was drawing people in? What Bible studies were people ordering a lot? What was, was it Beth Moore? Who were people receiving from that really made an impact on them? And in that time, in those first 2 years, the If Gathering happened. Jenny Allen. And that was Jenny Allen had this huge movement and idea of just discipling women, discipling the next generation. And she's a wordsmith. Just the way that she conveyed her message, I feel like women just like flocked to this concept and to the If Gathering thing of, like I want to be discipled. I want to be around other women. I want to be encouraged. I want to encourage others. I want to study the Bible. I want to do all these things. And so they were just drawn to this conference that she put on. And so, my ears and just perked up, and I just started really trying to figure out what did everyone love about this. And it was in my thought, it was the teaching, of course, was really phenomenal. She touched on these things of this discipleship and calling. And I think so many people, a big part of your podcast is about passion, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So it was her validating passion and saying God can use your passion. Rebecca Lyons was a part of that kind of group, and she has this thing. She says your calling is where your passion, and oh gosh, how'd she put it? I'll have to get back to you, but it was like your passion and your something else collides. That is your calling. And so I think just women really responded to that, and it felt very validated that they might have a calling that God could use. And then the other part of Jenny Allen and If their method and what drew women in, I think was just the artistry of their presentation. Aesthetically, it was just so beautiful. And I think it just really, it speaks to that, I think that creative piece of women where they love beauty. And so she just I think she hit on all these senses, and women really responded. I don't really believe in reinventing the wheel, but the Salvation Army cart, if you will, is so unique that I was like, if we adopt any of these kind of concepts, because there's really nothing new under the sun, we all draw ideas from other people's concepts, and if it lines up next to the Bible, then you can run with it. And so I saw what you're doing, so we can adapt this to our women and make it a little more Salvation Army centric, or centered on the Lord, but with that Salvation Army, not vibe, but because
context.
That's not always a great context. Thank you. That's the word I was looking for. I'm like, what is the word? Yeah, put it in a Salvation Army context, and And so we started moving in that direction, and from all that research and gathering came Embrace. And Embrace very much modeled off of their like if table concept of monthly gatherings of just a handful of women discussing questions. And it really and our women responded really well to that, and the even international heard about it and put it in their International Women's Magazine. And from there, I was getting leadership signups from South Africa, from the Philippines, from all these countries and other territories. And it was just really cool to be like, wow, guys, yeah, we really gotta pay attention to what is making our women tick, what's catching their attention, what they're craving, what they're needing fed. How are we discipling our women? And so just the Embrace launch was a huge highlight for me. Launching the new website and the new logo, that was a huge highlight for me, and that was in 2016. And then and that 2016 through 18 was the planning of the Rise and Shine conference. That was probably it was like I ended up leaving a year after that, but that felt like my final, I'm gonna get like I knew at that point I was gonna be leaving. Oh wait, no, I didn't. But either way, and that's just how I think I function, is when if I'm really passionate about something, I'm just gonna give every ounce of my ideas, my thoughts, my prayers towards giving it everything I could possibly give. So I feel like I just poured myself empty into Arise and Shine. And so that was that'll be a highlight, I think, just for even my ministry career, for lack of a better word, was being Arise and Shine wasn't perfect. There were certainly things that went wrong in the final hour that we had no control over, but there was so much more good that happened than disastrous moments that we can just reflect back and be thankful to the Lord that he used that time to gather so many women. There's over 1,500 women, which in our territory we never gathered that way before. So it was just really exciting to see so many women together. So that was a huge highlight.
Awesome. So that was, you said, in your last year or so in that position. And then what happened in your story next after that? Because another shift was coming, but how did that happen? Can you walk us through that?
Yeah. Well, what happened in my personal life that impacted decisions going forward, and I was even in that Arise and Shine planning, was drudging through some personal stuff, was my dad had died in 2017. And he was only 59, and just probably just the worst thing that's ever happened to me. And I know I'm not unique in that way. I know a lot of our friends have lost parents at really young ages, and so I know they know how hard it is to navigate life and be normal. And when you lose a parent, like your nuclear family, it's like life before they died and life after they died. So in this drudging through life after he died, I felt the Lord say, you need to stop doing what you're doing at the core, at the church level.
Oh, wow.
You need to just take a break. You're going to be busy. Basically, like, you're going to be busy at work. So give yourself some breaks in this area, and just let yourself take rest at home if you need it. Don't make yourself busy just to not feel it all, but like feel it all. I want you to feel it all.
Wow.
And a lot of people are like, then I felt a lot of peace. And I was like, not me. I did not feel a lot of peace after that. I felt a lot of discontentment, and I felt a lot of struggle, because I was really missing what I was doing at the core, because I was the women's ministry secretary at core I attended. And we were doing a lot of the things that I would introduce territorially. I would pilot, I would try out at the core first to see if people were interested or feasible. And so
Yeah.
we were making a lot of having a lot of fun changes and experiences with the women at Oakbrook. And I loved it. I really, really loved being a part of that. And so for the Lord to like say, let someone else work on that for now. And you just be with me. So in that time, I would just have the immense sadness of the loss experience, but then I also kind of had this other loss of not doing the ministry I really cared about. And so I was like, God, why would you kind of make me go through a loss and a loss? This
Yeah.
doesn't feel, I don't really get it. But what happened in that time is I really realized how much I loved that local church ministry. And I would wish that Simon made twice as much money. And I would be like, because if he made more money, I could just quit my job and I could just go to the core. And I could just be like one of those full-time volunteer people and do what I really care about and I could give 100% to doing the job I do at the core instead of giving just a fraction of my energy because I have to worry
Mm-hmm.
about work. And in that thought process, I like felt the Lord say, people do that all the time, Sarah. They become core officers. So if you want to, if that's something you want to do, you want to really pour into the local church, you can do that. But you're going to have to leave your life to gain that. And I was like, whoa, that's heavy. Like, I don't know I don't know about all that. And so I was like, Lord, you got to talk to Simon because this isn't something you do on your own. You do this married. So, and I would just pray. I was praying this prayer like, Lord, yoke us in ministry, whatever that means. And when I was praying that for a while, actually, and even before this thought of becoming an officer came in my mind, because I really wanted to share that ministry part with my spouse. And I didn't know what that would look like because we tried YPL. That's our
Mm-hmm.
youth group. We did that together and we tried it out and we're like, okay, it wasn't like electric.
Yeah.
Let's maybe something else and nothing else really came, because
Mm-hmm.
there's not a lot of not a ton of shared ministry opportunities you can have with your spouse outside of youth ministry
Mm-hmm.
or music ministry. So I was just praying like, Lord, okay, like, what, I want something with him. So just yoke that up whenever you're ready. And so it was after Really Rise and Shine that I had that thought. And so about 6 months after that, Simon, he had a encounter on the highway where he had pulled over because he was making plans to one day become a president in his company, in this commercial construction company he worked for. And really they were they were starting to groom him for that. They were
Wow.
preparing him in a lot of ways for like, hey, well, this is like a natural next step and you've done a lot to impact our company positively, and here's some things that you could do to get prepared. And he started doing some things on the side to put some more tools in his toolbox,
Yeah.
figuratively speaking. But the Lord just was like, that's not what I want you to do. And so he had this moment driving in his truck on the way to work. And so that day, either that day or at lunch or something, he calls me and it's like, hey, we got to talk. And
Wow.
yeah, and so he comes home and is like, I think we're supposed to be officers. What do you think about that? And I was like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? At that time, and then I don't say that totally like in a dread way. Like, it was just kind of like, I think for me sometimes it's more logistically like, oh my gosh, I have to sell
Yeah.
my house, I have to quit my job, I gotta do all this stuff. Are you kidding me?
Pack everything up.
Pack everything up, sell everything. Oh, that sounds like a lot of work. So, but he was serious. I wasn't like 100% sure how serious he was. And I was like, well, when you're in the Salvation Army, you have to be, if you want to become a pastor, an officer, you have to be a member of the church, which is like you are a soldier. And he was not yet a soldier. And I was like, honey, you have to be a soldier first. So it was like kind of like challenging him, like, this is what you want, you're gonna have to talk to Major Pook, and they're not. He like called like that within like 5 minutes of me saying that, and he left and he went over to their house, and I was like,
wow.
okay. I'm like, what's going on? I'm like on the floor with the dog, like, okay, my life's about to change. So yeah, so that's kind of how the journey began. Just, trusting the Lord that he would, first bring me some healing in this loss I was experiencing from my dad, and the Lord really used that time of grieving to remind me of what I care about, what matters to me, and ways that he's equipped me. And that's where I feel like it really began. I'm like, there's things from years ago, even on mission trips, you kind of have those moments if you're being hosted by a really fantastic officer, and you're like, wow, if I could just be like them, maybe I would want to do this, and then you kind of let it sit on the burner, or take it off the burner, because it's not you're like, maybe it's not a real idea, but it, the thought came back much more intensely 2 years ago, and then here we are in it, and what I can say, for some, I'm going to jump ahead.
Okay.
Because I started thinking about it when you started talking about the myths of the passion. How'd you phrase that question? Is it okay for me to jump ahead like that?
Go for it. What were some myths that you believed before you started your passion, or just like an outsider looking in? And then if you have any myths that you hear a lot about now that you could debunk. So either of those two routes.
Well, answering specifically the passion thing, I wouldn't say becoming an officer is my passion. Being obedient to God, since choosing to be obedient to him initially back when I was 22, that's really been a driving force within me, is to how can I be within the will of God? How can I say yes to him again today, and again today, and again today? And so saying yes to officership was just another act of obedience for me. And the myth, I think I believed, and I think maybe held me back for the right time, honestly. There's an idea passed around and enforced in a lot of spaces, because it's true for a lot of people, that you become an officer because you are called to become an officer. And that is true for a lot of people. I've never identified with that idea or concept. And in fact, I think it held me back for a number of years for giving it some real thought, because it's like, all these people talk about this really intense calling, even this moment at the altar, or they just knew this was a calling God had on their life. And I was like, I don't know that I have that calling. And if it's very specific, the way I've heard it described every year for so many years since childhood, and I guess I'm not called. But I feel like the Lord continues to tell me, I call you into obedience every day. And this becoming an officer, really, when I look at the scope of the ministry I've done, to me it just feels like a natural progression to continual service to him, and to continually being in his will is stepping into officership. And so I just feel called to obey him. I think we all have that calling. It's always going to look a little different. I mean, you read the Bible, and that is the continued theme, certainly in the Old Testament, but throughout, is obedience. And saying, and I think he did, I feel God has said, this is where I want you to go. Do you want to do it? And I'm like, you know what? Yeah, I'm not trying to make it casual. I really am not. But I just felt like it was also a choice for me. Where I said, this is a natural progression for me to step into officership, to say yes to this. And so, and in some ways, and I don't want to say this and make it sound like like officership is something you settle for.
Mm-hmm.
But as I've looked at the ministry I've done, I think there was even a point where I was like, well, what else would I do? This is something I've always, not always, but in my 20s and now in my 30s, I'm like, I've always been a part of this ministry.
Mm-hmm.
I can't imagine doing anything else. Maybe that's the better way to say it. I can't
Yeah.
imagine. I've thought about it, and I've even get different points, like, when you're fed up in a job and you're just like, I'm going to send out applications.
Yeah.
I've done that when I've had those dark, disappointing moments, and nothing would ever happen of them out in like the marketplace, out in different industries. And I do believe that's just the Lord closing the door. Like, no, this is where I want you. I want you in this church ministry, in this Christian ministry. I want you here. So no, I'm not going to let you go off that way. You've already done had all those off the path moments. Let's stay back on the path. This is where I brought you. Let's stay here. So no, don't stop doing that. And if you keep doing it, I'm just going to keep shutting the doors. And so this door certainly did not get shut, as we pursued it. Was it easy? No, there's a lot of really hard moments of uprooting your life after you've established yourself as an adult and bought homes, sold homes, bought homes, just watched your parent die, all these very adult experiences that I know, yeah, of course, a number of people have experienced at younger ages, but it very much impacts you. You age, you
Yeah.
age when you have done these things and experience these things. So to kind of stop that and kind of start over, again, that's also a very adult decision, to uproot your life and keep saying yes to God, even when it's really dramatic and big and hard. I've found so far, even when though it can be very difficult to be on this campus, that God is with me and He's faithful. And even in the ways that I would have said, it would look like God is faithful if
Mm-hmm.
God is always like, okay, you need to keep at it because you don't really know me quite yet.
Yeah.
You need to pray more, child. You need to get into the word more. You need to seek the Holy Spirit more, because I don't think you know me quite yet. If that is how you equate faithfulness to basically granting you wishes. So my daughter, you need to stop. And I've had some hard lessons with that,
Yeah.
but He is faithful even in the ways you wouldn't imagine.
Wow. That's so good. I feel like there's so many things that you said that just really resonated with me. I really like how you kind of clarified that throughout your time. I think we can really see throughout your story, just once you said yes to serving Jesus and having a relationship with him, that has been part of your story of obedience, like you said, saying yes to what he has for you. And even just having that time that you described, just the conviction from the Holy Spirit and being like, oh no, I'm saying yes, but what is this going to mean? And you've had that so many different points along your story, and it's just been interesting to say it's the same question and same answer, but different circumstances each time along your story.
Yeah, that's such a good summary, Audrey.
So I have a question for you. For people who are hearing your story and they're like, wow, saying yes, it just sounds so simple and so easy. What kind of, I don't know if you have any advice, or maybe you heard some advice and maybe this kind of resonated with you along your journey, but do you think you have anything specific as far as if somebody's hearing this and they're like, you know what, I kind of resonate with this, saying yes and obedience to God, what would you tell them?
I feel like for good or for bad, sometimes I had a lot of ones that I did really allow myself to be discipled. And there's things that people spoken to me that I wish I would have listened to.
Hmm.
And then there's things that were spoken into me that I wish I would have just kind of left on the floor, the drawing room floor,
Yeah.
or the cutting room floor. And I would say seek the spiritual gift of discernment
Mm.
and really give a lot of thought and study and prayer to spiritual gifts. And what I've learned a lot about that actually in the last couple months, really through the teaching of my husband and I teaching each other. Because I think, especially in quarantine, we've had so much time to time and space to really hear each other and to pray more. And you've heard the things I've shared about core ministry and territorial ministry and so many things. I was, like I thought those are my gifts of, like production or productivity that
Mhm.
benefited people. There was results, a brand new logo that meant something very specific and unique to women, Christian women, or a brand new small group program, a brand new email newsletter, whatever, a brand new at the core. I started an annual women's retreat at the core that was really special and
Mhm.
fun. So all these kind of results based things almost,
Yeah.
or tangible even. And so since being at the college, which does have a high emphasis on academics, I haven't been able to do the things I've done in the past that made me feel fulfilled in ministry. And
Mm.
and so I've been having a hard time. And so in this, going back to what I've been learning the last 2 months, the Lord's like, there's giftings I have for you that aren't these results things or these event-based things. Yes, you could be gifted in how you plan a program, Sarah, but I have other gifts for you too.
Wow,
And
that's so good.
they're they're ones that you've been afraid of. They're ones that the church has been afraid of. Are
Mm.
you going to ask for them? Are you going to pray about them? Are you going to practice them? And that's been very profound for me and for us as we really take stock in what is valuable in the kingdom of God.
Mhm.
Yes, events can be very valuable, programs can be very valuable because they create the space for people to hear the gospel of Jesus Christ and accept him as their savior. But at the same time, there's just so much more. They say about the brain, we only use 10% of it. It's the same concept in the spiritual life. We only tap into the very, very tip of the iceberg of what God has for us in terms of spiritual giftings. So that's something I would say is just really reevaluate what you know or believe about spiritual gifts and pray for discernment so that you know what to do with that when people pour into you
Mhm.
and disciple you, because there's good things and there are things that just aren't for you.
Yeah.
It could be very good advice, but it could have been better advice for Audrey than Sarah.
Mhm.
And it might have been advice that they received at one point that they said, I know I got to pass this down one day, but it really wasn't intended for me.
Mhm.
And so to be able to say, receive it because you feel like the Lord has sent that for you, or to be like, nope, that one was not for me, and know how to graciously set it aside and keep moving forward. And even with that, be very conscious and discerning and careful with the words you put on other people,
Mhm.
because you will receive as you are discipled. But if you're discipling others, be very wise in the words that you give them. For example, I won't go into great detail. Our friend Sarah Ruthberg, I passed advice
Mhm.
on to her that I experienced, but then in the aftermath, I was like, I don't know if that was really great advice for her.
Mhm.
Like it worked for me in my context and in my life, and I might have thought that was a universal truth, but maybe it wasn't for her,
Yeah.
and maybe it wouldn't be for you either. And so not to really project onto others what was right for you, because maybe it
Mhm.
won't be right for them. Um, so don't be so quick to give advice. Just listen. Do a lot of listening, and then do some praying, and then maybe if you feel a guy gave you something to share with that person, call him later and say, "Hey, this came to me. What do you feel about this?" So don't be so quick to give advice.
Yeah, I really like how you kind of walked through that. Just the whole idea of discernment and just asking God to give you that wisdom, because I think, like you said, there's a lot of things. There's a lot of cool on Instagram quotes or, different things that are lettered really beautifully, but it may
Mm-hmm.
look really cool or whatever. It may sound, like people are telling you package these great words, but
Mm-hmm.
it may not be for you at this time, at this moment.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe later,
Right.
maybe they needed that
Yeah.
advice before or something. But I
Mm-hmm.
think I think that is a big takeaway that I can really resonate with, of just praying for discernment of, is this for me? Is this something I need to take with me? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's really good, Sarah.
Good. I'm glad. I'm glad you can gain something and glean something from that.
That's what I discerned.
I like what you did there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for just sharing your story and your overarching passion and your mini passions of, fashion and serving in the church. Those have been really awesome to hear about. Thank you so much for joining us each week to listen to our awesome guests as they come and chat about their story and their passions, and how their passions have grown and evolved throughout their story. I am super humbled and so honored that you would choose to download and listen to these conversations every other week through inviting me into your earbuds, your headphones, your car, your Google Home, wherever you listen to us. Thank you so much, friend. I am so grateful for you. Can you do me a favor? If you're not subscribed to the podcast yet, would you do that in whatever podcast player or app that you're listening to us on today? If you're already subscribed, thank you so much, friend. I truly, truly appreciate it. It makes a huge difference. I would love to if you could share this show with a friend. I find out about so many different shows through recommendations from friends. Maybe some of you have found out about this show through a friend sharing it with you. Lastly, would you please leave a rating or review on whatever podcast player or app that you're listening to us on? Thank you so much. I know that these things may seem small, subscribing, sharing the show, leaving a rating and review, but they truly do make a huge difference in new listeners finding the No Wrong Turns pod. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here, for listening, for cheering on the No Wrong Turns pod. Thank you for subscribing, sharing, and reviewing the show. So before we close, I just want to ask you one question that I ask all the podcast guests, and that is, what's fueling your passion and
Mm-hmm.
what's fueling you today? So this could be anything from maybe a new Netflix show that you
Mm.
found, or a new cooking concoction that you've made during the quarantine,
Mm-hmm.
or a new book find.
Well, there's a few things I'm like excited about.
Hmm.
I got new glasses. I got new frames, and
They
that
look
that
they
kind of
look great.
it kind of gives me an energy or excitement. That's kind of a superficial one. That just is giving me hope in these dark days. No, but I'm reading this book called Spiritual Gifts in the Local Church.
Hmm.
And it really connects back to what I was talking about, like really using this time to truly seek spiritual gifts. And I think that's giving me a lot of hope. And it's really, if my passion is to serve with the local church and to proclaim the good news of Jesus Christ, that is kind of fueling that passion and giving me more courage and giving me, man, I'm gonna say something and it's kind of like I'm gonna drop that and there's no time to go any further. Really trying to open my eyes to spiritual warfare
Wow.
and 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 just what that looks like as a follower of Jesus, because it's real
Hmm.
and it's doing a lot of damage, and but our God is bigger and greater, and he wants to use us to do even more than that's what the word says, that he wants us to do even more than he did. And man, what does that mean? And so just really trying to discover that through the scriptures and Holy Spirit and reading this book to see what God has this for us. He said, all believers, I have gifts for you. And so yeah, I'm feeling fueled by that reality. That's a reality if we're willing to grab hold of it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sarah, for just sharing your story and your passions and just being so open with us today.
You're welcome. Thank you for the invitation and thank you for your patience with me.
Yeah, no problem. Friends, I have loved our conversation with Sarah. There were many different parts of Sarah's story that stuck out to me. One of those was the importance and the reverence that Sarah spoke about the idea of being obedient to God. I love how she said it. She said, "A driving force within me is how I can be within the will of God, saying yes to Him today." I love how she phrased this idea of obedience, how that's an act that happens on the daily, and how looking at decisions and asking God, "Is this in your will for me?" I also love how she shared the importance of seeking the spiritual gift of discernment and how you can use this gift to be able to weed out things that God doesn't have for you, so you can be able to see the things God does have for you. I hope that you were all encouraged today through Sarah's story and her passions. My prayer is that you would consider what God has for you and what He might be leading you to. Our episode was edited by Sophia Bote, social media managed by Olivia Bote, and you can see the show notes for our music credits. Alright guys, enjoy your week and happy Thanksgiving! If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. That would be so awesome. And I will see you back here next time for our conversation with Taylor Rambo. Hey friends, you have just listened to the No Wrong Turns pod with Audrey Hickman Hunter. I'm Audrey and I'm your host, and I am so happy that you are here. If you like what you're listening to today, make sure that you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. We are bringing you new shows every other Tuesday and always have on some awesome guests to come and chat about their story and their passions and how their passions have evolved and grown throughout their story. Subscribe today to the No Wrong Turns pod with Audrey Hickman Hunter on your podcast player or app so you will never miss an episode. See you next time.